The outside there, it was a quiet Tuesday afternoon when she walked into the gym. The heavy metal door creaked behind her, announcing her arrival in the large training hall that smelled of sweat and effort. Her clothes were simple, just a beige hoodie and loose-fitting jeans. Her shoes were old, one sole slightly worn down. No one turned to greet her. The mats were already full of men and women stretching, grappling, laughing with one another. But she stood there, a quiet figure at the edge of a world that did not seem to notice her. Her name was Hana. She had come from a distant country, her accent thick and unfamiliar to most around her. English was not her first language, and that often made people impatient with her. She didn't talk much. She had listened. She observed. She stayed quiet, even when the world gave her reasons to speak. Her calm, however, was not weakness, it was survival. She had heard about this gym from a flyer she found in the laundromat. Brazilian jiu-jitsu classes for all levels, it had said. Something about that line made her feel brave. Maybe it was. The word all. For once, she hoped it meant someone like her too. A woman with no friends in the city, who worked long hours cleaning offices at night. Someone who kept her dreams hidden because they seemed too strange. Too foreign, too big for her small rented room got as Hana stepped onto the edge of the mat. The noise in the room lowered slightly. Not because of respect, but curiosity. Even annoyance. A tall, lean man with a tight black rash guard and a smirk on his face walked over. His name was Mason. He was one of the assistant instructors. Strong. Confident. Too confident. Hi, he said, looking her up and down. Are you lost? Hana shook her head politely. I come for class, she said softly. Mason raised an eyebrow, then chuckled. Class started 10 minutes ago, he said. And no offense, but you don't exactly look ready for combat. Someone behind him laughed. Hana smiled politely. Even though her chest tightened a little, she looked around. Everyone was in their gear-tight uniforms, mouth guards, belts tied snug around waists. She looked down at her hoodie. She had no gear. She didn't even know if she could afford it. We have a trial class, Mason said. But, this isn't yoga, you know? People get slammed. You sure this is for you? Hana nodded. Yes, I want to learn. The head coach, a quiet man in his late 40s named Diego, walked over. His hair was short and gray, his eyes tired but kind. He watched Hana for a long moment. Then he nodded once and handed her a clean loaner GI, folded neatly. Put this on. Join the warm-up? He said. His tone neutral. Hana took the uniform, bowed her head, and walked toward the changing room. Some girls on the other side whispered and giggled. She heard one say, "She looks like she's never worked out in her life." The other replied, "She's probably going to quit halfway through." But Hana didn't quit. She had not come to quit. Inside the locker room, she changed quickly. Her body was slim but not weak. Her muscles were long and wiry, shaped by years of unseen discipline. She tied the white belt around her waist, her fingers pausing for a moment on the knot. Her heart beat faster. It wasn't fear. It was something else, something deeper. It was the pull of a memory, something buried, something old, when she stepped onto the mat. The class was already doing rolls and shrimping drills. She copied what she saw, awkwardly at first. Her movements didn't look perfect, but there was something about her that made Diego watch. Her eyes followed everything. Her hands adjusted slightly, correctly, without being told. They paired her with a girl named Britt. Britt was sharp-tongued and competitive. She had a blue belt and years of training. When Coach told her to go easy, she smiled tightly. Sure, she said. I'll babysit. Hana offered her hand. Nice to meet you. Britt barely touched it. Yeah. They began to drill basic guard passes. Hana was quiet, focused. Britt grew annoyed quickly. You have to move faster, Britt snapped. And don't just lie there. Okay, Hana said softly. She adjusted her hands. She tried again. Then something strange happened. Britt went for a pass, and Hana shifted her hips in a way that surprised even Britt. Her legs locked for a second, and Britt nearly lost her balance. "What the hell?" Britt said. "You've done this before?" Hana shook her head. "Just watching." The room kept training, but now a few others had started glancing over. Mason frowned. Diego crossed his arms and said nothing. Later in the class, they moved to light sparring. Hana wasn't supposed to spar her first day, but Coach Diego gave her a nod. "Only if you want," he said. Hana nodded. "I want." Mason smirked. "I'll take her," he said, nice and gentle. Some of the others laughed. "Don't break her on day one," someone joked. They stepped onto the mat. Mason dropped low, loose and confident. Hana stood still, her feet light. Mason moved fast, grabbing her sleeve and trying to pull her into his guard. But in a flash, something shifted. Hana's single quotes ass body reacted without thought. She dropped her weight, turned her hips, and swept his leg. Mason fell harder than expected. Not enough to hurt, but enough to surprise. Enough to silence the room. Mason laughed nervously as he got up. Lucky move. They reset. This time. He shot in for a takedown. Hana's timing was sharp. She sprawled, caught his neck, and turned it into a simple but precise guillotine setup. Mason rolled, escaping just in time, but his breathing was heavier now. For the next 2 minutes, she moved with quiet accuracy. Not aggressive, not flashy, just controlled. When the timer beeped, Mason stood up and wiped sweat from his face. "Okay," he said. "Not bad for a beginner." Hana smiled. "Thank you." But the others were no longer laughing. They were watching. As class ended, Coach Diego approached Hana. "You said you never trained before," he said slowly. I trained long ago," she replied. "Different style, not jiu-jitsu." "What style?" Hana hesitated. "It doesn't matter. Now, I forgot most of it." He nodded slowly. "You didn't forget. Your body remembers." She gave a small bow and said nothing more. Later, in the locker room, Britt stared at Hana. "You tricked us," she said bitterly. "You made us think you were weak." Hana looked at her. "I didn't say I was strong either. Whatever," Britt muttered. "You won't last a week here." Hana quietly packed her clothes. "Maybe," she whispered, "but I will come back." Outside, the night air was cold. She pulled her hoodie over her head and walked slowly to the bus stop. Her fingers still felt the grip of the GI. Her heart felt something she hadn't felt in years. Purpose. But what she didn't know, what no one knew, was that this quiet return to the mats would awaken not just old skills, but old scars. She had not come here just to train. She had come here to find herself again. And in the shadows of the gym, her past would soon collide with her present in ways no one could predict. A storm was coming, and Hana was not as simple as she seemed. The whisper of memory the next day. The sky over the city was pale and heavy with clouds, the kind that seemed to press down the buildings like a burden. Hana sat on the bus again, clutching her old cloth bag on her lap. The gym uniform inside was folded carefully, even though it was only a borrowed set. She had cleaned it with her own hands, scrubbing out the sweat stains with soap from the dollar store. Every motion had been careful, respectful, like she was cleaning something sacred. As the bus rolled forward, she stared out the window, the streets passing like flickers of her past. Her fingers traced small invisible patterns on the fabric of her bag. They were patterns from a time long ago, from a country where her name was not strange, where her silence was not seen as weakness, but as discipline. But here, in this city full of noise, fast footsteps, and careless laughter, she felt like a ghost walking through a story that didn't belong to her. When she entered the gym again, no one greeted her. A few people glanced at her, but quickly looked away. Mason was rolling on the mats with another brown belt. Britt was whispering with 2 other women near the lockers. They looked at Hana and then lowered their voices. Hana heard the word pretending. She heard show off. She heard weird. Coach Diego noticed her and gave her a single nod. He didn't speak much, but there was something in his eyes, a quiet curiosity that hadn't been there the day before. Hana joined the warm-up again, moving with quiet focus. She followed every drill. Forward rolls, hip escapes, technical stand-ups. Her movements were smooth now. Not because she had learned overnight, but because something was waking up inside her, something she had pushed deep down for years as they paired off for drills. Coach pointed Hana toward a man named Elias. He was older than the others, slower, but experienced. He had a purple belt and a calm face. When Hana approached, he smiled. "New here?" He asked kindly. "Yes," she said. "You move like someone who isn't new," he said as they bowed. She didn't answer. They began practicing guard sweeps. Elias was steady, his hands precise. He guided her through the mechanics, pointing out details that others might miss. "Pressure on the shoulder," he said, "not too much grip. Peel there. Balance. It's about timing." Hana nodded. She tried it. It worked. Not perfectly, but better than most first-week students could hope for after a few rounds. Elias sat back and wiped his forehead. "You ever trained judo?" he asked. Hana looked down. "A long time ago." He nodded. "It shows. Your hips know how to speak." That line struck something deep in her. Your hips know how to speak? It was something her first teacher had once told her long ago, before everything fell apart. She closed her eyes for a second. She saw it again, the wooden floor of the old dojo, the sound of bamboo slapping during warm-ups, the stern voice of Master Akimoto, the man who once called her his best student, and she saw the moment when it all ended, the tournament, the fight that changed everything. The one where she had refused to follow the order to injure her opponent. The one where she had been publicly shamed, her belt taken from her, her name whispered with disgust. Not because she lost, but because she chose not to win at the cost of someone else's body honor. Her master had said is not the same as obedience, and yet she was banished for it. That was the last time she had worn a gi until yesterday. Her heart was beating louder now. She shook herself free from the memory. She looked at Elias and nodded once. "Thank you for training with me," she said softly. He smiled. "You're welcome, Hana." Later that day, Coach Diego called the students around for positional sparring. The goal was simple escape from bottom mount. One partner pinned the other, and the bottom player had to find a way out. It was a drill that tested not just strength, but calmness under pressure. Hana was paired with Mason. He smirked again, as if the previous day had not happened. "Let's see if lightning strikes twice," he said. She lay down. He mounted. The timer beeped. Mason pressed hard, trying to use his weight to trap her hips, but Hana's breath was slow. Her eyes closed for a brief moment. Her hands moved under, frame, bridge, shrimp, recover. Within 15 seconds, she was back in guard. Mason grunted. Again. They reset. This time he locked her arms, tried to pin her wrists. Hana felt the pressure, but she also felt the rhythm of his breathing. She waited, then exploded into a sharp hip escape, slid her knee through, and reversed the position. Coach blew the whistle. The room was quiet. Even Britt had stopped talking. Mason sat up, frustration flashing across his face. "Where did you say you trained again?" Hana looked at him. Her voice was calm. "I didn't." He stared at her. "You think you're special or something?" "No," she said. "I think I am learning." He stood up, muttering under his breath, but not everyone looked at her with annoyance now. A few newer students were whispering, not with mockery, but with curiosity. One girl, Emily, approached after class. "You were amazing," she said. "Can I train with you next time?" Hana smiled. "Of course." That night, as she walked back to her tiny apartment, her feet were sore. Her hands ached, her back throbbed. But inside, there was something burning brighter than the pain. It was the feeling of belonging. Not fully, not yet. But the door was cracked open, and she didn't want to run anymore. That night, she sat by her small window, a cup of hot tea in her hand. The room was silent except for the distant hum of traffic. On the table was a notebook. She opened it. On the first page, she wrote just a few words. Day 2. I remembered something. She paused. It felt like home, but outside of her tiny apartment. Things were already shifting. Coach Diego was reviewing the footage from class. He always recorded sessions for teaching and liability. But this time he watched Hana closely. He paused the video on her guard recovery, then on her hip escape, then again on the reversal. That's not beginner, he whispered to himself. He closed the laptop slowly, and then he made a call to someone who hadn't stepped on the mats in years. I think I have found someone, he said. Someone different. Meanwhile, Mason paced back and forth in the locker room, frustration boiling in his chest. He slammed his locker shut. She's hiding something, he told Britt. No one moves like that by accident. Britt nodded. You gonna do something about it? Mason clenched his jaw. Yeah, next time. She rolls with me again. But Hana didn't know about the plans forming behind her back. She only knew that something inside her had awakened. And she couldn't go back to sleep again. Her hands still remembered the feeling of control. Her feet remembered the rhythm of the fight. And though she had buried her past, it was now rising again, unfolding like the pages of a forgotten book, written in sweat, silence, and sacrifice. And deep down, Hana felt it too. This was not just about training, it was about proving first to herself and soon to the world that no matter how invisible someone seems, they are never truly powerless. Under the scant morning sun barely touched the cracked windows of Hana's apartment, but she was already awake. Her body sat still in a quiet stretch on the cold wooden floor. Her hands rested on her knees, palms facing upward, fingers relaxed. But aware, her breath came in slow, deliberate waves. She wasn't meditating in the way most people imagined. It wasn't about clearing the mind. It was about preparing the spirit. She had learned that in a place far away, where the morning smelled of pine and the dojo had no mirrors. Only shadows and respect. She moved through a short sequence of warm-ups. Her feet slid silently across the floor as she remembered forms, once practiced 1,000 times, now returning as if they had been waiting for her. Her body ached from the previous day's rolls, her ribs tender from Mason's pressure, her wrists slightly bruised. But pain didn't frighten Hana. She had lived through deeper ones. As she left for the gym, she carried more than just her GI in the bag. She carried memories stitched into muscle, memories she didn't want to wake but couldn't avoid anymore. When she walked into the gym that afternoon, something felt different. Not louder, not quieter, but tenser. Like a string pulled tight, almost ready to snap. Mason was already on the mats, practicing takedowns with another assistant instructor. Every movement of his was sharper today, less playful, more forceful. He barely looked at Hana when she entered. Coach Diego, however, nodded at her with that same quiet gaze he always gave, but this time his eyes lingered for a moment longer. Like he was trying to see through her. Hana placed her bag down and began stretching near the edge of the mat. Emily waved at her from across the room. Hana smiled and waved back. Britt rolled her eyes, her fan clubs growing. Britt muttered under her breath. The warm-up started, drills followed. The day's lesson was focused on side control escapes. Coach demonstrated the move twice, calling on Elias to be his partner. The room watched closely, nodding as he broke down the technique step by step. When it came time to drill, Coach split the class into groups. Hana ended up paired with a new guy named Russ. He was big, maybe 6 feet tall, with a friendly face and a nervous smile. Hey, Russ said awkwardly. First day. Hana nodded. Welcome. We take it slow. He grinned. Thanks. I'm terrible with directions. They practiced side control transitions. Hana walked Russ through the movements gently, even showing him how to adjust his hips and where to grip her gi. Russ laughed nervously. You're really good. I am still learning, Hana said, and she meant it. But the piece of the session didn't last long. Coach clapped his hands after a few rounds. Live drills now, he said. 30 seconds top person holds, bottom escapes. They rotated, and then it happened. Coach looked at Hana. You're with Mason. A few heads turned. Mason stood up, his jaw tight, his eyes sharp. He said nothing, just walked over and got into position. Hana laid down. She was calm. She could feel the tension in his body even before the drill started. The timer beeped. Mason smashed down into side control with force, heavier than necessary. His forearm pushed against Hana's jaw. His knee pinned her hip. His grip locked down her arm. There was no room, no space. He was trying to smother her, not just physically, but emotionally. Publicly, the room grew quiet. Hana did not panic. She focused. Breathe. Create space. Don't fight his strength, redirected. Slowly, deliberately. She began to frame with her arms. She didn't push wildly. She adjusted her elbow, turned her shoulder, shifted her hips, created a sliver of daylight. Mason felt it and adjusted, but not in time. She moved her knee through and created the angle. Shrimp. Bridge. Recover. Guard. Time beeped. They reset. Again. Mason came down heavy, this time harder. He slammed his weight into her chest, trying to flatten her completely. The edge of his belt struck her ribs. Someone gasped. Coach was watching closely now, silent. Moving. Hana endured. She had faced worse in her life, worse than a man trying to crush her on a mat. She had faced abandonment, exile, humiliation in front of people she loved. Pain wasn't new. Pressure wasn't new. Betrayal wasn't new. Mason was just another test. This time, she didn't just escape. She reversed in a flash of timing and skill. She bridged, caught his elbow, rolled him over, and mounted him. 30 seconds. Clean. Controlled. The timer beeped again. Mason sat up, furious, his face red, his breath heavy. You held on to my sleeve too long, he snapped. That's illegal in competition. Hana tilted her head. This is not competition. Coach walked over. I was watching, he said quietly. It was legal and clean. Mason stood. Whatever. Coach looked at Hana. You okay? She nodded. Yes. Thank you. The next part of class was open sparring. Coach allowed students to choose their partners. Emily quickly rushed to Hana's side. Please, can I roll with you? Hana smiled. Of course. They sparred gently. Hana gave Emily room to experiment, to fail, and try again. She corrected. Her posture kindly celebrated her small victories. Emily laughed after the round. You should teach, she said. Hana shook her head. Not yet, but others were noticing. Not just her skill, but her attitude, her calm, her kindness, and also the strange way she moved like she had done this forever, yet claimed to be a beginner. After class, Diego approached her near the exit. You lied, he said softly. Hana looked at him. You said you never trained. I didn't lie, she replied. I said I trained long ago. I said I forgot. He nodded. Well, he didn't forget. Not at all. He paused. I used to teach at a dojo in Japan years ago, he said. One day, I watched a tournament. A young girl refused to finish her opponent, even though she had the chance. She lost on purpose. I never forgot her. They stripped her belt and banned her from competing. She bowed her head and left the mat. Hana stood very still. Diego's eyes softened. That girl moved exactly like you. Hana didn't speak. He placed a hand on her shoulder. If you ever want to talk, I'm here. She nodded slowly. Thank you, Coach. He smiled and walked away. Hana turned and faced the window, the city lights glowing outside like distant stars. The gym behind her buzzed with the sound of bags being packed, zippers closing, students laughing. But inside her heart, silence was growing louder. The past was catching up, and someone else was watching. Brit. She had seen the way Coach talked to Hana. She had seen the way others looked at her with new respect. Jealousy stirred in her chest like smoke. She's not special, Brit whispered to herself. But deep down, she feared that maybe Hana was far away, in a quiet hallway. Mason sat with his phone in hand, replaying the video someone had recorded of their spar. He watched himself being reversed again and again. He paused the screen. Then he opened a private message to someone outside the gym. I need to find out who this Hana really is. He typed, "Can you help?" The reply came quickly, "I know someone who can." As Hannah walked home that night, she didn't know her name was about to be searched in databases, forums, and martial arts archives. She didn't know that photos of her old tournaments would soon resurface, that whispers from her past would travel across oceans. She only knew that for the first time in years, she felt strong again, and strength always attracts enemies. The name she left behind 2 days later, the world was still gray. Light drizzle soaked the cracked pavement, and the streets buzzed with the familiar impatience of city life. But Hana didn't rush. She never did. Her footsteps were calm, almost meditative, as she made her way to the gym. Under her hoodie, her GI was neatly folded, still smelling faintly of hand soap and rain. Each step she took echoed quietly through her body, like she was walking deeper into a path she once swore never to return to. As she reached the gym's door, she paused. Through the frosted glass, she could already hear the low murmur of voices, the slap of feet on mats, the occasional burst of laughter. But underneath those sounds was a shift, like the rhythm had changed, something subtle but undeniable. It wasn't just curiosity anymore. It was attention. When she entered, the room quieted for half a second before returning to motion. She didn't look around, but she felt it. Eyes followed her now. Not all, but enough. Even those who had ignored her days ago now tracked her movements. Like she was a riddle they couldn't solve. She bowed to the mat and took her usual spot on the edge. Emily walked over with a wide smile. "I saved a spot next to me," she said. Hana nodded gently. "Thank you." As they stretched, Britt passed by. Her voice was light but sharp. "I guess some people get special treatment after 2 classes," she said, loud enough for others to hear. Emily frowned, but Hana simply continued stretching. She didn't need to answer pettiness. Silence was its own kind of power. Warm dash-ups began, then drills. Today's lesson was back escapes. Coach Diego explained it calmly, as always. But something in his tone was more serious. His eyes drifted to Hana often. She felt it but said nothing. They paired up. Hana trained with Elias again. He moved a little slower now, his joints stiff from age and past injuries. But his experience showed in the way he taught through movement. Everyone's talking about. "You," he said quietly during a pause. Hana kept drilling. "I didn't ask him to." "No," he said, "but you woke something up. This place. It needed someone like you." She gave him a small smile, but it faded quickly. Attention had a cost. Across the room, Mason rolled with fire in his veins. He moved aggressively, pushing younger students to their limits. He wasn't teaching. He was proving something, or trying to dot. After drills, the students formed a circle around Coach. He clapped once. "Today, we'll do positional challenges," he said. "One person in the middle. Survive or escape." He looked around the group. "Hana, would you mind starting?" A ripple moved through the circle. Britt raised her eyebrows. Mason folded his arms. Emily gave a little cheer. Hana nodded. "Yes, Coach." She stepped into the center of the mat. "Top mount," Coach said. "First partner, Russ." The large, kind-faced beginner stepped forward. "Go easy," he whispered. Hana smiled. "Do your best." Russ mounted. The timer started. He pressed. Down gently, trying to control her hips, but not really understanding how. Within seconds, Hana framed, bridged, and escaped. The group clapped politely. "Next," Coach said. "Elias." Elias bowed before mounting. He was more precise, more aware. He controlled her arms, adjusted his balance. Hana waited, her breath steady. Then she moved fast, clean, efficient. An elbow escape, hip out, recovery. Beautiful, Elias whispered as he stepped off the mat. "Next," Coach said. Mason stepped forward. Coach hesitated for just a second. Then nodded. Double quotes, go. Double quotes. Mason dropped hard. His knee dug into her thigh. His hand pressed on her sternum. He wasn't trying to hold position. He was trying to dominate. Hana moved. he countered. She adjusted. He tightened his grip. The room watched closely. 10 seconds passed. Then Hana found the opening. A sudden bump of her hips. A shift of weight. A slide of her left leg. And Mason was off balance. With a sharp angle and precise motion, she swept and reversed him. She didn't hold mount. She didn't gloat. She just reset quietly. Mason stood up, fury boiling beneath his calm face. But before he could say anything, Coach spoke. Last one, he said. Britt. The gym fell silent. Britt stepped forward, her mouth set in a line. They bowed. She mounted. Timer started. Hana moved. But Britt didn't just resist. She slapped her forearm across Hana's throat and pressed. Coach stepped forward. Easy, Britt. I am, she said through clenched teeth. Hana tried to frame. Britt dug her knee harder. Hana winced but continued. She rotated, bridged, twisted. Her hips. Britt grunted, trying to hold her weight down. Hana's ribs screamed. And then a clean reversal. Hana was on top. That timer beeped. But instead of getting up, Britt shoved her. You think you're better than everyone? She spat. Hana froze. You come in here, act quiet like you're innocent, but you've clearly done this before. Who are you, really? Coach raised his voice. That's enough. But Britt kept going. I found a video, she said, from a tournament in Osaka. Girl refused to fight. Bowed out. Same hair, same face, same exact movements. Your name's not even Hana, is it? The room froze. All eyes turned to Hana. Her chest rose and fell. Slowly. Her hands didn't shake. Her face didn't flinch. But her eyes showed. A storm. My name is Hana now, she said. Softly, Coach stepped forward. Voice calm but firm. We don't shame people here for their past. Britt scoffed. We should know who we're training with. Hana looked at her, not with anger. Not even pity. But with a kind of sadness. I came here to forget who I was, she said, not to pretend to be someone else. I am not hiding. I am healing. Coach turned to the group. We are not defined by what others say. We are defined by what we do when no one's watching. Hana has done nothing but train with respect and kindness. The gym was quiet. Mason, still standing at the edge, looked down at the floor. He said nothing. Britt walked off the mat, shaking her head. Hana sat alone for a moment, the sounds around her muffled. The weight of her old name pressed on her, like a shadow she couldn't shake. She had not planned to face it so soon. But maybe it was time. Maybe the world needed to know. That the girl from Osaka didn't quit because she was weak. She chose not to break another human being just to win. And now she was back. Not for revenge. But for something much deeper. Peace. But peace always had a price. And there were still more battles ahead. The breaking point rain came heavier that night, soaking the cracked sidewalks and flowing through the gutters. Like tiny rivers, cars passed with splashes and blurs, but Hana didn't notice them. She stood beneath the metal awning outside her apartment, staring at the reflection of the street lamp in a puddle. Her GI bag hung off one shoulder, soaked from the walk home, but she hadn't tried to cover it. Her mind was far away back in the gym, back on that mat. Back in that moment when Britt had spoken her name without saying it. Back when everyone's eyes turned toward her with confusion, judgment, pity, and worst of all, doubt. She had felt it before, years ago. In Osaka, the weight of people believing the worst because they could not understand the truth. She unlocked her apartment and stepped inside. It smelled faintly of damp tea leaves and fabric softener. The room was quiet, as always. She didn't turn on the lights. She placed her bag down carefully, took off her shoes, and sat cross-legged on the floor in the middle of the room. The silence was heavy tonight. It wasn't peaceful. It was the kind that wraps around the chest and makes it hard to breathe. She looked toward the corner of the room where a folded letter still sat beneath a teacup. An old one, unopened. From Master Kimoto. He had sent it after she left Japan. After she vanished, she had never read it, not because she didn't care, but because she didn't feel worthy. Until now. With trembling fingers, She unfolded the envelope and pulled out the paper inside. The handwriting was neat, exact, just like his voice measured, thoughtful, deliberate. You disappointed me that day, Hana. Not because you lost, but because you walked away without telling me why. I trained you not to win fights, but to face them. Now, if you are reading this, it means you're still searching. Good. Never stop. But remember, silence is not always strength. Sometimes it is a prison. Break it when the time is right. Her eyes filled with quiet tears, but she did not cry. Not loudly, not in the way others do. Hers were silent, like her. The next morning, the clouds had cleared, but the city still wore the smell of wet concrete. Hana walked into the gym earlier than usual. Only Coach Diego was there, arranging pads and wiping down benches. When he looked up and saw her, he nodded. I didn't expect you so early. He said, I couldn't sleep. She answered. He hesitated, then motioned toward the edge of the mat. Sit with me. They sat in silence for a moment. Then he spoke. I knew who you were the second day. She looked at him. Not fully, he added. But I remembered the movement, the softness, the precision. The girl who bowed out in Osaka. The one who made the crowd boo. Not because she lost, but because she refused to win the wrong way. Hannah's voice was almost a whisper. I didn't want to hurt her. I know, he said. That's what made you different. She looked away, but they didn't see it that way. They thought I was weak. Or afraid. She nodded. I was afraid to become someone I didn't recognize. He leaned back slightly, and now she was quiet for a moment. Then she said, I want to teach. Not yet. Maybe later. But I want to stay. To learn. Not just to fight. But to build again. Coach Diego smiled. You're already doing that. That evening, class was tense. Britt didn't speak. Mason avoided eye contact. The whispers had stopped, but not because people weren't curious. They just didn't know what to say anymore. Coach split the class into groups for positional sparring again. Hana partnered with Elias, then Emily. Both were warm, supportive. Careful, but then Coach called for a final round. Free roll, he said. Any partners? Mason stepped forward. I'll take Hana. The gym went quiet again. Coach looked between them, then nodded. Keep it clean. They bowed. The moment their hands touched, Hana felt it. His energy was sharp, tense, coiled. He was holding something back, or preparing to unleash it. They circled. Mason attacked first, shooting for a quick takedown. Hana sprawled. He tried to pull her into guard. She passed quickly, controlled, but he escaped. Their roll continued fluid, fast, technical, but there was an edge to it now. A fire underneath. Mason locked in a body triangle from the back. Hana winced. He squeezed. You don't belong here, he whispered. She shifted her weight, twisted. Her hips slipped one arm in and peeled his grip. Her breathing remained calm. I've earned my place, she replied. Mason tried to armbar her next. She defended. Reversed. Now she was in top knot. He struggled. Then something changed. He bridged. Hard. Too hard. Not just to escape, but to slam. They crashed. Gasps filled the gym. Coach stood up. Enough. Hana didn't move for a second. The air had been knocked from her lungs. Her ribs ached. But she stood slowly. Mason froze. He hadn't meant to injure her. Or maybe he had. Maybe even he didn't know. Coach walked onto the mat. Go to the locker room, he said to Mason. Now. Mason hesitated, then left. Coach turned to Hana. Are you okay? She nodded, though her side throbbed. I'm fine. Coach looked at her carefully. You don't have to prove anything. I know, she said, but they do. Next day, Mason didn't come to class. Coach called a team meeting before training. Everyone gathered on the mat, sitting in a wide circle. We are a team, he said. This gym is not just for competition. It is for growth, for discipline, for character. We do not tolerate disrespect or violence born from ego. He paused. We all have pasts, some heavier than others. But no one here is defined by their worst moment. His eyes met Hana's. We're defined by what we choose to do next. Emily clapped. Others followed. Britt stood in the back, arms crossed, but her eyes were uncertain now. Less fire. More reflection. Hana bowed slightly. She stayed after class, cleaning the mats with a towel and spray bottle. Emily helped. So did Elias. No one said much. But there was a new rhythm in the room, softer, warmer. As Hana left that evening. She felt the weight on her chest ease for the first time in years. But she didn't know that the next class would change everything. Because in the hallway outside, a poster had been taped to the bulletin board. Invitational jiu-jitsu tournament. Open division. Submission. Only one-night event. Black belts welcomingly noticed it first. Are you going to sign up? She asked Hana. Hana looked at it. For a long moment. She said nothing. Then. Yes, she whispered. But you're still wearing a white belt, Emily said. Hana single quotes. eyes stayed on the word black belt written on the flyer. Then it's time they see the truth. The longest 14 seconds, the gym lights buzzed overhead, casting a pale glow across the crowd gathered near the mats. Folding chairs lined the edge of the tournament floor. Beyond them, rows of spectators stood behind a velvet rope, some with phones raised, others whispering names of their favorite competitors. But no one spoke Hana's name. Not yet. She stood alone near the back, adjusting the white belt around her waist. It was the same loner GI from her gym, clean, plain, almost invisible among the collection of expensive, customized uniforms that filled the arena. Other fighters wore patches with sponsors, country flags, academy crests. Hana wore silence. Coach Diego stood beside her, arms folded, watching the brackets being announced. He glanced at her once and nodded. You're sure about this? He asked. Hana nodded slowly. It's not about winning, she said. It's about showing them. He smiled faintly. Good? Because what you're about to do will echo for a long time. On the other side of the venue, Britt watched from the spectator section, arms crossed, brows furrowed. Emily stood next. To her, bouncing on her heels, nervous and excited. I hope they record this, Emily whispered. No one will believe it. Britt didn't answer. But deep down, something in her was changing. The jealousy had quieted. The bitterness had thinned. And all that remained now was respect. The announcer called names over the speaker. One by one, fighters stepped forward, facing off in rounds that grew faster, tougher, meaner. It was an open invitational. No belt divisions. Only weight class. Submission only rules, and Hana, a white belt on paper, had signed up to face black belts. People thought it was a joke. Some laughed. When they saw her name on the bracket, a white belt in the finals bracket, they assumed it was a typo until they saw her first match. A brown belt named Jason, fast and aggressive, rushed her like she was nothing. Within 23 seconds, he tapped caught in a triangle choke so clean and effortless it looked rehearsed. The crowd grew quiet. Second match. Another brown belt. She swept him from closed guard and mounted him. When he tried to escape, she transitioned to an armbar so fluid it looked like water pouring from a cup. Third match black belt. This time, the crowd leaned in. They expected resistance, strength, domination. But Hana didn't dominate. She danced. Her footwork, her timing, her sense of pressure. It wasn't normal. It was beautiful. It was terrifying. Coach Diego watched with arms crossed, whispering once under his breath, they still don't understand. She's not fighting to win. She's fighting to wake up the truth. In the fourth match, the gym reached a silence so deep you could hear the breath of every person watching. Hana pulled guard, let her opponent pass, and then swept him at the perfect angle to land directly and mount. 10 seconds later, a perfectly timed collar choke forced the tap. Now, no one laughed. People crowded near the mats. Coaches whispered urgently. Even the tournament organizers came closer to confirm her name, her gym, her belt level. It didn't make sense. None of it made sense. A white belt. or a ghost. Then the final was announced. Her opponent, a well-known black belt named Raphael, a competitor with years of experience, tournament wins across 3 countries, and a reputation for crushing submissions. He stepped onto the mat with a calm expression, nodding politely to Hana. I don't underestimate. You, he said quietly. She nodded. Thank you. The referee called for readiness. The crowd was still. No one blinked. The match began. Raphael moved cautiously. He respected her. He circled, gripped her collar, feinted a trip. Hana didn't rush. She mirrored his steps, measured, grounded. Then struck. A takedown attempt. Explosive and sharp. Hana sprawled. They scrambled. Her hand found his sleeve. Her hips twisted. She pulled guard, and then it happened. A loop, a shift, a trap. She baited his pass. Let him drive forward, and then like lightning, her legs closed around his head. Her arm locked behind his shoulder. Triangle. Choke. Tight. Clean. The referee dropped to 1 knee. 8 seconds. Raphael twisted, turned, tried to posture up. Hana adjusted her angle. 10 seconds. His hand hovered. 12. His breathing changed. The struggle faded. 14 seconds. He capped it. It was over. The room erupted. Not in cheers. Not immediately. First, there was stunned silence, then gasps, then applause. Then a roar. The announcer, dumbfounded, said her name again, just to confirm. Hana, white belt. Submission victory in 14 seconds. Coach Diego walked toward her, calm as always. But his eyes were full of pride. You could have done it in 10, he said softly. Hana smiled faintly. I wanted them to see. Emily ran toward her and hugged her tightly. You did it. Britt stood at a distance, arms crossed again, but now her eyes were soft. When Hana looked at her, Britt nodded once. Not out of defeat. Not out of surrender. But acknowledgement. Respect. Back at the gym days later, the walls buzzed with talk of the match. Video clips went viral. Forums posted screenshots. Mystery white belt destroys black belts. Is Hana even her real name? Who is the silent storm in jiu-jitsu? Hana said nothing. She didn't have to, because now everyone knew. Not just her skills, not just her history. But her story. She had come from silence. From rejection. From a moment years ago, when she bowed her head and walked away from everything. Because she chose kindness over victory. And now she had returned. Not to prove them wrong, but to prove herself right. That resilience was quiet. That humility was powerful. That true strength was not how many people you could beat, but how much of yourself you could forgive. As she stepped onto the mat at her gym. Once more still wearing the white belt, students stood up and clapped. No longer because they were confused, but because they understood. And then, without fanfare, Coach Diego walked to her. He held out a new belt. Black. Clean. Folded. This is yours, he said softly. Hana looked at it for a long moment, then shook her head. Not yet, she whispered. Not until I've taught someone else. Coach nodded slowly and placed it beside her bag. Just in case.